June 6, 1944. After months of preparation, the Allies land in Normandy. On the beaches, the Germans had also been waiting for a long time and hoped to be able to repel the invasion. After very negative results on the Eastern Front since the defeat at Moscow, Stalingrad, and Kursk, the German leader had placed all his hopes in 1944 on repelling the Allied attack. However, it was not long before it became clear that the invasion had succeeded and that the Germans would hardly be able to send their enemy back to the sea. Kurt Meyer, commander of the 25th SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment of the Hitlerjugend Division, said the following when he heard that the Allies had set foot in Normandy: "Little fish, we will send you back to the sea." In this battle, the elite German panzer divisions were fully employed to prevent the Allies from breaking through France. Next, in this program, we are going to analyze the most striking curiosities of the Waffen SS in the Battle of Normandy. Starting from the beginning, the first thing we are going to see is the difference in size between a German SS Panzer division and an Allied armored division. The three most striking SS Panzer divisions that participated in the Battle of Normandy were the Leibstandarte, das Reich, and Hitlerjugend. They had a staff of about 180 tanks, of which about 100 were Panzer IV's and the other 80 were Panthers. For their part, the British were much larger, reaching almost 250 armored vehicles. The American ones were more similar to the German ones, with about 168 medium tanks and 83 light tanks. In terms of their organization and composition, it should be noted that the German divisions were more balanced in terms of tanks and mechanized infantry units, known as Panzer Grenadiers. They generally had one armored regiment and two mechanized infantry regiments. The Americans, on the other hand, were lighter and more mobile, with 3 battalions of tanks in a single regiment. They also had more vehicles to transport their infantry and had more artillery support. Finally, it should not be forgotten that they enjoyed total air superiority, which made all their actions much easier. Regarding the British, it should be noted that they usually had an armored regiment and an armored infantry regiment, with more tanks compared to the Americans. Their combat doctrine was the most conservative of all. Regarding equipment, it was clear that the Germans had an advantage over the Allies. They used tanks such as the Panzer IV, the Panther, and the Tiger I, with better armor and firepower than their enemies' armored vehicles. However, they had quite a few logistical problems with their maintenance and fuel supply. The Americans used the M4 Sherman, which had good mobility but less armament and armor. They were joined by tank destroyers such as the M10 Wolverine and M18 Hellcat. Finally, the British also used the Sherman, with variants such as the Sherman Firefly, with a 17-pounder gun, more effective against German armor. They also had tanks such as the Churchill and Cromwell. The Churchill was heavily armored but very slow, while the Cromwell was hated by British crews, who preferred to fight with a Sherman. Having seen the difference between the various divisions, let us now look at one of the most interesting aspects of the Battle of Normandy. We refer to the reason why the Germans were unable to carry out the large armored counterattack they had planned. When the invasion began, only the 21st Panzer Division was in the vicinity of Caen. Although this unit counterattacked during the afternoon of June 6th, it was not enough to repel the invasion in the British sector. The German plan was to have at least several panzer divisions, such as the Hitlerjugend and the Panzer Lehr, join together to carry out this mission. However, none of these units would be able to arrive in time to carry out the planned major attack. Let us now focus on the case of the Hitlerjugend Division, which was the first to arrive in the sector during the night of June 6th. Before the battle, this division had about 21,000 men and about 180 tanks divided into 3 regiments: the 12th SS Panzer Regiment under the command of Max Wünsche, the 25th SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment of Kurt Meyer, and the 26th SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment of Wilhelm Mohnke. It is often claimed that the Hitler Youth Division reached the sector west of Caen during the night of the 6th of June. But this is not entirely true. By the early morning of the 7th of June, only the bulk of Kurt Meyer's 25th Regiment and a battalion of the 12th SS Panzer Regiment with about 50 Panzer IV's had arrived in the sector. The other battalion with the remaining 50 Panzer IV's was not expected to arrive during the day, and the battalion with the Panther tanks was stuck on the other side of the Orne River because it had run out of fuel. Finally, Moncke's 26th Regiment was also on the other side of the Odin River and was not expected to arrive in time to take part in the attack. By the morning of the 7th of June, only a third of the elite Waffen SS division was facing the British and Canadians northwest of Caen. They were therefore unable to do anything other than call off the major attack planned for that day, which was intended to reach the coast. As the first units of Fritz Witt's division took up positions northwest of Caen, the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division and the British 51st Infantry Division advanced towards them. It was at about 3 p.m. when the Canadians reached the outskirts of the town of Authy that all hell broke loose. Just a few yards away from the Ardennes Abbey, Meyer was watching everything and quickly ordered the attack. The German offensive lasted for the rest of the afternoon, until at nightfall, Kurt Meyer's young soldiers reached the line between the towns of Combe and Franqueville. The fierce fighting caused some 300 British and Canadian casualties, along with 21 tanks, while the Germans suffered another 300 casualties. This was the baptism of fire for the Hitlerjugend division. Although not all the division's elements were there yet, they managed to stop their enemy's advance, holding the city of Caen for more than a month. However, it was a somewhat frustrating day for the German commanders, who were unable to carry out their counterattack plan and had to settle for smaller operations. From then on, the remains of the Hitlerjugend and Panzer Lehr divisions arrived in the sector little by little and were never able to unite to launch a coordinated attack. Instead, they had to cover the gaps that the British and Canadians opened in the sector. The following curiosity leads us to analyze the number of Allied offensives that the Hitlerjugend division, based in the vicinity of Caen, managed to stop directly or indirectly from June 7th until the end of the Battle of Normandy. It is estimated that, in total, this division contributed to stopping some 14 Allied offensives that were intended to gain ground in Normandy. During these battles, the ratio of casualties suffered in comparison to its enemy was 6-1 in favor. The next point of the program will take us to analyze what happened to the sister division of the Hitlerjugend, in this case, the Leibstandarte division. When the Battle of Normandy began, both were part of the 1st SS Panzer Corps. However, while the 12th SS Panzer Division was ready for action, the Leibstandarte was far from it. During the last weeks of 1943 and the first months of 1944, the Leibstandarte saw the heaviest fighting it had ever seen in the vicinity of the Dnieper River in Ukraine, trying to stop the Soviets from advancing further west. The fighting was so brutal that in just 4 months, the unit went from having almost 20,000 men and more than 200 tanks, 95 Panzer IV's, 96 Panthers, and 27 Tigers, to becoming little more than a Kampfgruppe with just over 1,200 combat personnel and just 7 operational tanks. This led to it having to be withdrawn from the front to recover before going into action again. Their new destination would be the Atlantic coast, specifically in Belgium. After a few months in Belgium, by June 1st, 1944, the Leibstandarte had once again reached a staff of 22,200 troops, although it had a deficit of 182 officers and 1,398 non-commissioned officers. Its armored strength consisted of 79 Panthers and 103 Panzer V's. However, the unit was only a shadow of what the Leibstandarte had been during the previous campaigns in Russia in 1943 and 1944. Now, more than ever, it had to rely on its seasoned officers and non-commissioned officers who had already been fighting for almost 5 years. This was because the time for instruction and training of the troops was increasingly shorter because they were urgently needed at the front. The different battalions of the Leibstandarte were arriving in Normandy little by little during the period between the end of June and mid-July. It was not until the 11th of July that they were finally able to relieve the Hitler Youth Division in its positions south of Caen. It was all over for them in Normandy a month and a half later, when Allied forces closed the siege at Falaise, trapping some 50,000 Germans and forcing the survivors to abandon most of their heavy equipment. The Leibstandarte's losses in the Normandy campaign are estimated at around 5,000 men, along with all of its armored vehicles. Although not all of them were killed in combat, some of them had to be abandoned at the end of the battle due to lack of fuel. Another curiosity of this program, which also greatly affected members of the Waffen SS, was the so-called sniper fever. Due to the inexperience of many Allied units and the unexpected combat in terrain dominated by high hedges, every time a rifle shot was heard, Allied soldiers assumed it was an enemy sniper. This soon led to a terrible fear of this type of enemy developing. It was called sniper fever. In most cases, the culprit was nothing more than a panzer grenadier firing his normal weapon from a standard but carefully prepared position. Much of the confusion was due to the fact that in the British Army, snipers were equipped with camouflage jackets. In the Waffen SS, unlike the rest of the German army, panzer grenadiers normally wore camouflage tunics, hence the confusion. The panic became so widespread that by June 27th, it was ordered that all mention of snipers should cease and that reference should be made to isolated enemy soldiers. In relation to this matter, it should also be noted that, as a general rule, during the Battle of Normandy, neither snipers nor men using flamethrowers were captured alive. The last curiosity of the program takes us to the death of the famous German panzer, Ace Michael Wittmann. As you all know, Wittmann died on August 8, 1944, between Caen and Falaise, while trying to stop the British offensive that threatened to encircle the remnants of the German army in Normandy. After seeing how the Tiger in which Wittmann was riding was destroyed, a period of 60 days was given in which Wittmann was officially missing because his death could not be certified. It was not until almost 40 years later, specifically in 1983, when his remains were finally found buried near where he was shot down. He was identified thanks to some false teeth that Wittmann was known to have had, as indicated by his dental records, and an identity plate of Wittmann's driver named Heinrich Reimers. Although it is often claimed that the German captain died inside his Tiger due to the explosion, the fact that his remains were found in such good condition that they even allowed a local farmer to bury them suggests that Wittmann and part of his crew had time to abandon the tank before it exploded. If so, they could have died while outside the Tiger due to further gunfire or the explosion of the tank itself. Today, the 5 crew members are buried in the cemetery of La Combe in Normandy. So, what do you think of these curiosities? If you would like to accompany me on the next trip that we are going to organize in Normandy next year, you can write to me at the email address that I leave in the description. Greetings to everyone and see you next Sunday. See you soon.